teams of LLM agents may actually be more biased than individual LLM agents, and the reason is actually pretty simple. In this paper, they analyzed what LLM agents do with respect to what's called escalation of commitment bias. Escalation of commitment bias is just basically being obstinate, stubborn, digging into a position, even and especially in the face of negative evidence that that position is the correct one. So they put the agents in a simulation where um, they were executives in a financial company, and investment decisions were either going well or did not go well. And they looked at what the agents did in the context where the decisions did not go well, which is where you would see escalation of commitment bias if it was present. And in the conditions that they had for the study, they had some conditions where an individual agent was either acting as a decider or an advisor, but then they had other conditions where agents were acting as a team in concert. And what they found was that in the individual conditions, the individual agents were potentially more rational than humans with respect to escalation of commitment bias. They were more easily able to detach from their commitment when negative evidence started to mount. In the case of the groups of agents, though, they found that the escalation of commitment actually increased in the face of negative evidence. Why might this be the case? One of the hypotheses that the authors of the study put forward is that LLMs are trained on human text, and so biases that humans have may end up being latently transferred into the agents. But why those would come out more in a group context is interesting. And my read of it is as you start into an increasingly long conversation between agents, the context that the agents are generating for each other starts to overwhelm the prior context that they had. And there's nothing in the LLM architecture that especially privileges policies that you might write into the agent versus context unless you architect that into the system somehow. And so I think it's an interesting finding. It kind of argues that individual LLMs in small scale transactions might be the more optimal units for making certain kinds of decisions. And it also has ramifications for context engineering too. We want to make sure that we're engineering context so that the derived content that the agents produce for each other doesn't catastrophically outweigh the instructions or the guidance that they have. And that's something that we may not find in many context engineered systems. So, some food for thought for today.